what person here. Recording in progress. We call her Bertha with our voice here. Date May 6th.
Yeah, day after Cinco de Mayo.
Day after Cinco de Mayo.
Very good.
So we're honoring the week of life, continued from last week. And if you're watching this video, and I really recommend you watch last week's to really get the most out of this week, because this is the sort of the time of life and fertility. And if I watch my garden grow from February till now, in February I had plants that did not exist. They were in their pots, you know, like comfrey. It's a annual, so well, it's a perennial annual. So it's like, and the valerian and the teasel, and then there's nothing in the pot or nothing in the garden. And then now it's like the gynostemma, which was nothing, is now the ones in the big pots are like, it's this tall and, you know, this wide, and it's like, well, that's fertility. Because what is sexual energy? It's creative energy. Yeah. Because you're creating a new being. So nature's creative energy is, you know, like, God, I just love this metaphor. Nature's sex is flowers. That's nature's sex. And I'm going to do a timeline of the opium poppy I'm growing, because I got them growing. And so the opium poppy grows up, like now the vegetative growth is growing up. And then when the flower is ready to, the flower stem comes out, but the flower is like this. And it's a classic, you know, it's a limp penis. And then as the flower gets ready to be pollinated, it goes over about 3 or 4 days. And then there's this green sac around it, these red ones. They're red, they look like dahlias, peonies. They're not the classic buttercup poppies. And if you're watching this video, this is a private membership association. So we're not in public realm. And we're doing it for educational purposes, because Health Alchemy is a ministry of nature and health. That's what we are. And it's a private membership, 508(1)(ca). We're a ministry of nature and health. So these poppies, you know, this is why I love plants. They go up and there's this green capsule around it. And so one day the capsule literally, it pops off. Like an orgasm. It pops off. And then if there's any bees nearby, they go into an orgasmic fit trying to get into these poppy flowers. I have videos from my YouTube channel from years prior of 5 or 6 or 7 bees all in one poppy flower. It's like they can't get enough of the bar, right? Get me in there. And they spin it, they fly around outside the flower. They're all disoriented and drunk on opium nectar. And it just tells you how all beings, you know, love to get high. And they're pursuing their joy. And their joy is that, who knows what kind of pheromone that thing's giving off? Because I've had these things with no bees anywhere. And then like, where do they come from? You know, like, where did all these life come from? The #1 longest plant pheromone that I read about was a plant that when it gets eaten or is being eaten by a predator, it sends a pheromone out for a parasitic wasp. It can travel up to 2 miles. That's amazing. This pheromone from this plant. Yeah. And then it hits the insect that comes in and kills the plant that the other insect that's eating. Right. Are you 2 miles?
Yeah, that's impressive.
I mean, I tell people, if you're not in awe of some of the things that we find out, like the fact that human blood and plant blood are identical, if that doesn't make you in awe, you're half dead. You know,
that sounds a lot like the trees where the drafts are going in to eat the leaves on the trees. The trees release that as some pheromone, and they talk to each other. So all the way down the line, and then the drafts go to the next one. It turns the leaves bitter. So they go somewhere else. They stop eating.
So it saves the trees.
It saves the trees. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So in permaculture, I had a very interesting nutrition. You know, the beginning of my nutrition program was, I saw very early on, because one of my best friends chose not to get a bachelor's degree in nutrition, but he chose soil science. And I thought, well, that's where nutrition comes from.
Yeah.
You know, so I thought I better learn soil science. So that was where permaculture came in. And then there's some really good observations of what they call plant generals that inform the soil, you know, where to send the resources. So there were 2 that really struck me, was wormwood and the elder tree. And they tell other plants and the mycelium where to direct resources to the plants that are stressed out in their vicinity of, you know, influence. Interesting. And I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. And how would they corroborate that?
So in the soil, like plants and humans are inverted. So the human brain is above, the plant brain is down in the soil. And that has to do with the mycelium and the root connection to the mycelium of the earth. So the earth has a big brain, and then the individual plant has its sort of root brain, I call it. And so in 1996, Paul Stamets, some of the famous mycologists, he had a video at a Bioneers conference in San Francisco where he was showing the mycelial signals traveling under the earth. It looked just like brain neurons. I was watching this 96 going, this is exactly the way a brain and neuron pattern is, exactly the same. And that's where I started doing this work of this inverted relationship. So it's this, it literally is a brain, dude.
Yeah.
And there's a Netflix video that I don't know if it's on Netflix anymore, but it was a great production called What Plants Talk About. And these scientists were doing all these experiments and showing that plants had volition and intelligence, but they're scratching their heads going, but there's no brain. And that's because they haven't done the other half of the work, which is consciousness is not centered in the brain. It's not localized in here. Any of us who's woken up knows that.
Right.
It's not. And so that's what you find out when you wake up, like, oh, wow, I'm not the center of my own universe. My thoughts aren't even my own, you know, and that's a really important place to come in our spirituality, is the non-identification with this. Still loving it and owning it fully, but not identified with it, that it is what we are. This thing is not what I am. It's an earth suit in my theater of the soul. So I can glorify the divine in this realm.
And enjoy it in the process.
And enjoy it. Oh, I'm enjoying myself. This is my birthday month. I don't have a birthday day, I have a birthday month.
I was talking a long time ago to a guy who was a medical engineer, and he's told me about this mystery that inside the head, all the brain activity is digital, but if you measure it outside the head, it's analog. He said it's a total mystery.
Wow.
So Steiner, do you know Rudolf Steiner's work?
Yes.
Anthroposophacy. 100 years ago, him and some people in the East were talking about the problem with materialism in the Western world. And so Steiner, I'm going through this paper right now, I'm trying to teach what he's pointing at, and that's, he says the oxygen inside your body is different than the oxygen in the air. It's alive in your body, it's dead in the air. So the elements inside of ourselves have a different form and function than they do outside of ourselves, which is, I believe, what you're pointing towards. Okay.
I want to think, how do they figure it's digital? How do they figure it's digital? How do they measure that it's digital?
Right, because there's somebody measuring it, right, with a parameter based on an ego.
Yeah, like a 0 and 1, where the
What's the tool?
specs?
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, where's the evidence?
Oh, you cornered Kent over there, poor guy.
He was measuring this stuff.
He was
Yeah.
with electronic
Yeah,
devices.
yeah.
Kent, if you can find any of that, that'd be great to send. You could
No,
send
it's
it.
just we were working together, and he just mentioned it one time.
Wow. So Kent's 85. So Kent has been through a lot, and he's our elder. I met Kent. Is shit, what's her name? Is she in India now?
Mary?
Is Mary in India now?
Yeah.
Okay. So bless Mary. Kent met me because of a nurse that I've been seeing at Dominican. I don't know why I'm seeing Kathy. Oh my God, 15 years maybe. So bless Kathy for sending you over, Kent.
Yeah.
What was the name of that movie you were talking about on Netflix? What Plants Think About?
What plants talk about?
Talk about, okay.
Oh yeah, so I'm supposed to actually. So if you didn't hear what Kent said, because I have a phone I can do. If we have a really longer check-in, we can do an audio recording of it. So what Kent asked was basically that when people measure the brain activity in the brain, it's digital, and outside the brain, it's analog.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've been discussing that. If you the volume was really good on last week's recording. It was the same setting as this, and there's fewer people, so I don't think it's going to be as chaotic. So the follow-up then is, you know, in my health practice over 35 years, the most important thing to me is our subjective experience. You know, are we feeling joy? Are we happy in our body? I don't give a crap about your numbers. the lab work looks horrible, but you feel good. Who fucking cares? Right? So I have so many examples, hundreds of people over the years where, one guy got all inflamed because he was a heart patient, and I was guiding him back to a normal diet from his low fat, low protein, high carb, vegetarian bullshit. And pretty bullshit, just ugh. So I told him, I go, your numbers are going to do this when you start eating more fat and protein. So his cholesterol levels went up a little bit. And so what people don't realize is that people have a higher mortality rate and more violent crime and mental issues with low cholesterol. People with higher cholesterol live longer and have a higher quality of life than those with low cholesterol, all other things being equal, and a lower mortality rate. They don't tell you that because when you take cholesterol meds, you might not die of a cholesterol-based illness, but you will die more likely of another thing caused by the side effects of the worthless statin you're taking.
Well, it's making them richer.
Well, and back in the 1970s and early 80s, that normal cholesterol according to medical doctors, if you had a 300,
Yeah,
that's normal. So
exactly.
it's only the pharmaceuticals that have been reducing it. Now they want it like 160 or less. And when you look at cancer patients, it's 160 or less. Like, no, you need cholesterol.
So and that's part of the conspiracy, isn't it? Because cholesterol is tied in with, okay. So if you're watching this and you know that if anyone's watched me long enough, you know that cholesterol is central to one of mine. You've got to have cholesterol metabolism working well. So what gets cholesterol made into? What's it the backbone for? Hormones, but stress hormones and sex hormones.
All hormones, period.
Well, there's some protein-based hormones like insulin and glucagon that are made from protein, and your neurotransmitters are made from protein. So granted, there's
the pregnenolone, the cortisol,
all the important ones, right?
Yeah.
They're made out of, so what else? That's one thing. The hormone. Bile is made out of myelin. Okay, myelin, your cell membranes are made out of it. Sure.
No, your brain is made out of it.
You could just generalize that and say the sheath around all the membranes around all the cells in your body. Big component. Cholesterol is an oxygen sink. There's more oxygen in cholesterol than we realized. So it's a backup antioxidant. When the system is stressed out, the body makes more cholesterol. Does that make sense? System's stressed out, the homocysteine markers are up, your cell metabolism's down, and that's all based on iron. Iron not being controlled and oxygen not being controlled. And what's the mineral for that? The two minerals? None of my long-term students are here. Copper and magnesium. What are the COVID recommendations? Fuck up. Copper and magnesium. Back to the conspiracy of idiots, the blind leading the blind. I mean, I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but if you want to cause hypoxia or the opposite, free radical problems, do the COVID diet. Take your synthetic ascorbic acid made from sugar, take your D3, which is radiated fat, take your, what's the next one? Your zinc without the whole food part, then you chelate copper out of the body. Let's see. Oh, by the way, if you take D3, there's 27 isomers or forms of D in sunlight. So would you rather have 27 or one form? When your D3 is low, that's only your storage form on the labs, which means you have high inflammation. And so taking D3 is like taking aspirin for pain. It's not getting at the root cause of the inflammation, which is your freaking high carb, stressed out lifestyle, Americans, and not being in the sunlight. But then they geoengineer the atmosphere and block. Let's see, Dane Wigington was a solar designer 20 years ago, and he said he started seeing his solar gains dropping 25% in the 90s. And that's why he started being the activist he is. Because he's like, I'm getting a fourth less sunlight. Why do you think D3 levels are down also? Because we're not getting normal sunlight. That's the part that I tell you, we got to wake up. And if need be, I'm going to blow those planes out of the sky. Because it's going to come to that point. Like, we're not getting any rain. Why are we not getting rain? Because they're fucking blocking it. And people, water, air, sunlight, and soil, the most important things for life. And they're controlling the water. And Nestle bought all the Shasta River stuff, all the Sacramento River headwater stuff. Oh, Nestle bought that. So you'll be paying for water soon. Because they dry us out and say, oh, there's a water shortage. No, there's not. There's always enough water on the planet. It's called primary water. And they can, oh, water this and water that. You know, I start to get so angry because of their bullshit propaganda. And you just want to break stuff, you know, like, because the evil we face now isn't an honorable evil. They're hiding behind veils. I'm an old Scottish Irish warrior. I'm gonna stick my sword into somebody. You know, like, you're killing women and children.
Yeah.
250,000 children a year disappear without a trace on this planet. 250,000, folks.
No, it's more than that, isn't it?
Is it more than that?
It's
Sure, it's
800,000
more. Yeah,
800,000 in the USA every year.
yeah.
In the USA alone?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one child every 40 seconds.
Oh, that's just
How many people die
mortifying.
of cardiovascular disease?
That's just
amazing.
mortifying.
That's the death, right?
So-
Wow.
You got Orange Man bad stuff too. Orange Man bad. What was Trump's first executive order? Orange Man bad. His first executive order was to stop child sex trafficking. Oh, but Orange Man bad.
Yeah.
What's wrong with stopping child sex trafficking? Tell me what's wrong with that. And then I'll go, you know, I'm not a Trump fan. I'm a journalist. And as a journalist, you've got to look at both sides and be objective. So I sit in the middle, like all these leftist idiots, you know, like, oh, you just do your thing for a while and watch the Bolshevik Revolution crumble around your feet and we'll call you a traitor 10 years from now, you know, but that's okay. We'll forgive you. Once you apologize. And then the right wingers got it wrong too. And there's the Hopium people, like, you know, like they just drive me bananas. Like, you can't talk about the geoengineering, Craig, because it bums out my beautiful love thing that I'm manifesting on the planet. I don't see anything negative at all. We're in a dualistic world. What's yin and yang about, right? You actually can't feel the love unless you can feel the pain. That's a Khalil Gibran pointer about love. Love is not heart chakra gushing. Love threshes you and breaks you down and destroys your ego. Now, do you want love? My teacher Ajashanti once said, every love sheds a tear. That's very simple and Zen-like, right? So there's a side to love that we don't, in America. I was like, oh, I heard this. I was in New Leaf and they had this pop song on. And it was, you know, the same formula. Oh, baby, you complete me. I'm nothing without you. Oh, it's just, I wanted to barf.
Yeah,
You complete me.
Go read the Shel Silverstein's, right? The Missing Piece meets the Big O.
Which one's that?
Shel Silverstein, The Missing Piece meets the Big O.
The missing piece.
Yep, meets the Big O.
Meets the
That's-
Big
that's
O.
Required reading, I think, for everybody. Yeah, no,
Anybody seen this?
no, it looks like a children's book, but it's very profound. I
Are you
read
writing
it.
this down, Jonty?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
missing,
Okay,
Shel-
good.
he's brilliant, right? Shel Silverstein, he's brilliant. The Missing
Well,
Piece meets the Big O.
Children's book.
Exactly.
Yeah, have you heard of this guy?
What's that?
This writer?
No,
I've never heard of this
you
guy.
know
Shel
who
Silver-
Shel Silverstein is?
No.
The Giving Tree. He was a
No.
he was a cartoonist for Playboy magazine. For
Really?
Oh, Leslie, I did not know that.
Yeah. He actually, I live on a balloon barge. His balloon barge that he lived on is the next number down.
No
So
kidding.
he was in Sausalito for a long
Oh,
time.
it's funny.
And anyway, he's a very interesting character. You should know a bit about Shel Silverstein.
Yeah,
You should
yeah.
check
Oh
him out.
my goodness.
Yeah.
He
He's like
actually,
this book.
Shel Silverstein wrote the song "A Boy Named Sue,"
Oh, really?
Oh, cool. Johnny Cash.
and he sang it with Johnny Cash on the Johnny Cash show.
No
And
way.
Shel Silverstein has a terrible squeaky voice, but he wrote some good songs.
Yeah,
And he
Wow.
hung out with Dr. Hook, used to come and
yeah,
play on his houseboat. And
that's
but,
great. That's great.
when you were talking about pain and love, I love the beginning of the movie High Fidelity, where Cusack is going, which came first, the music or the misery?
Mm.
And he's talking about, he goes into this little rant about how people are so worried about guns and that, but they're not worried about teenagers listening to music and all this heartbreak and all this stuff, so anyway, it's not, I don't know whether you've ever seen it, it's a must see.
It's a
High
great-
fidelity.
High fidelity.
I never
It's
saw it.
it's the
I never
best
saw
role.
it.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It's the best role Jack Black ever did.
Okay, I gotta watch it now.
And he's has a music store, he has a vinyl record store in Chicago. It was originally a book that was placed in England, but it's a must see for every bachelor. And women love it because basically Cusack does his role and they go, it's just great to see a guy, talk about how much of a jerk guys are, right? He's going through his 10 biggest heartbreak girlfriends. This is kind of what he's doing in the movie. And so it's a really, really good show.
He makes seduction tapes for them.
Yeah.
These are my
Yeah.
favorite songs and I've made it for you.
Oh, we used to make sex mixes. Remember the cassette tapes? We would make sex mixes on the cassette tapes. Yeah. Hopefully you could go the whole 90 minutes, right? 45 minutes each side. Okay, I'll put the side, honey. So I'm pretty sure I don't need to repeat what you said because your voice is big and let's see, we got 20 minutes about. I'd like to take it back to the little mini discussion, which is, so last week we talked about the day of light and life. Adyashanti once gave us sort of the parameters of what it means to be awake in the world, which is in the light, right? So when things are in the light, then generally things are lighter, right? And we're clearer. We have discernment versus judgment. In my long-term students, we have a discussion about the difference between discernment and judgment. So most of you
Here we are.
haven't had that discussion, and this is really good for the audience too. What is the difference between discernment and judgment? You want to take a shot?
So-
You probably heard it.
Oh, no, I totally.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
What is the difference between discern versus judging?
I'm glad you brought this up. We had this conversation a while back. About, on the phone, we were talking about, because I was saying this whole thing of like, oh, I'm not judging, or how people are so against judging now. And I go, well, you can't really live without judging. And then she brought up the fact that, well, maybe we should be using the word discernment rather than judging.
Right.
Yeah. So
Because discernment is neutral.
that's the key word is, I got that from the book Creative Visualization when I was 24 years old, Shakti Gawain.
Yes,
Remember?
yeah.
Remember that? And I was stewing on what does it mean to have a true inspiration versus bullshit ego-based inspiration. And the answer came in that book, which was anything that comes out of this, a true arising is neutral.
Exactly.
And so the Ayurvedics talk about, the pitta or the fire element. So you see how fire brings light, and when you have light, you see things clearly.
Mhm.
And when you have darkness, you don't see things clearly. So the parameter of higher consciousness then is things are clear, things are light, things are, it's obvious where to go and what decision to make.
Mhm.
If you're deciding between this and that, you stepped out of the flow of life. As I had a long discussion at Inner Light with Adyashanti, it was a 35-minute discussion about this very thing about prayer and deciding what to do and what's best. And he said, if you're thinking between this and that, you've stepped out of the flow. When you're in the flow, there's no this or that. It's obvious. Yeah, it's obvious which way to go. And I love that pointer because that's gallbladder in Chinese medicine. Left side, right side. I do this or that. So what is my number one pulse? The number two, the 12 meridians, the number two meridians in my pulse work over the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years is stomach and gallbladder are always off. Taking on too much and too many decisions.
Right.
Overwhelm.
Overwhelm.
So overwhelm always affects gallbladder and stomach because you're stomaching too much, right? Emotionally and mentally. So that's where pulse work. I mean, I stopped doing pulses junkie for almost 10 years. I was so frustrated.
Right.
It's so subtle. You're like, what the hell am I feeling here? And then there's 28 classic pulses. You got to memorize all of them. It's like, you're really going to get them all down without feeling thousands of people? No, you're not. So Tierra said, I was sitting with Michael Tierra, I was a few years in, and he goes, I've been doing pulses for 20 years and I still feel like a beginner. I'm like, that's not encouraging, Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not encouraging your students. So what brings you to life and what brings you to lightness, what brings you to clarity? And this was all mostly sponsored by Deanne's email to me of Charles Eisenstein, who, man, if you guys haven't followed any of his stuff, I see his stuff periodically, but
He's brilliant.
oh my God, he's the message, right? So his parameter of like, you're in your heart is you feel alive. And so this last week since then, this is my check-in and we'll go around is the waves have been big, like uncommonly big. Even New Brighton down in Capitola's breaking, which needs a gigantic swell or a straight west to get in. So each of the last mornings and evenings has been like, when are you gonna sit on your butt and do the same little thing and then go feel alive?
Yeah.
And so I've been getting up and feeling alive and then riding my bike here tonight from the other side of the county. My e-bike versus driving here was another example of I want to feel alive. And I'm not trying to set an example, but I'm riding my bike here and I'm like, wow, I'm setting an example, but I'm just following my bliss. And that's a good sign for me because I always wanted to be the guy that was sort of the show off in the water or surfing. And then on a day like today, when it's 10 foot, some waves as big as the ceiling over here, it's just survival. There's no place for ego. Guys are getting pounded and, washing machine cycle and held down for 30 seconds and then able to breathe. And, it's really where you get to meet your maker. There was a sign yesterday where I was down so long and I was still down. And I remember thinking to myself, if I don't come up soon, I'm going to drown. Because it was like 10 feet of white water came over me. And, I tried to get underneath it and I didn't get underneath it. It drew me from all the way outside almost to the shore. Came up like, oh, that's not good. But that's where, it's like, you're in martial arts contest and you gotta like, you're a single black belt and suddenly you're up against a triple black belt. And I was told long ago, you're not as good as you think you are. You're not as important as you think you are. There's always someone better than you. And for my, I have a bipolar arrogant shame cycle I go into. So when my arrogance swing, the manic arrogance swing, it's like, oh man, you better stay away from Craigie because he's, pretty out of control. And the other side's like, just love me because I'm stuck in this puddle down here, and give me all the love and attention I need because there's men in doing men's work for the last 27 years has led me to say in my survey, men, when they get really down to their core issues, it's usually shame. It's usually shame. Not that women don't have shame, but
Yeah, it is for women. Shame, lack, and isolation are the big ones for women.
shame, lack, and isolation.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
Shame, lack, and isolation.
Shame, lack, and isolation. There's been like, I think
Thank
22
you.
or 27 identified in all, but shame, lack, and isolation are the biggies for all humans.
For all humans.
All humans, yeah.
So this elder woman said this I was in a mixed gender group on the Mankind Project, and this woman from Hawaii she was like a 70, just a brilliant older woman. And she said, my observation of people who are waking up is that context, when they're starting to wake up, is men go to shame and women go to rage. So do you see that? Like,
No, I don't see that at
you
all.
don't see the rage.
Not at all.
I don't see much difference between the two.
Yeah, well,
I see
anger is a
I see more
secondary emotion
rage
anyway. It's never primary.
Right, there's that.
Yeah, so dig a little deeper. Where's that rage coming from?
Right.
Sadness, grief.
Shame,
Shame.
isolation, scarcity, yeah.
So some people present the anger, but others don't present the anger.
Right, and how much fire do they have?
Oh, yeah.
Right,
Right.
right. Well, I call anger.
Sort of makes sense to me because it seems like younger men are sort of enraged
Right.
a lot. Okay, so when they do wake up, there is an element of embarrassment and shame as you start looking at your behavior.
Yeah.
And so I can kind of see why it might reverse. I mean, I'm not saying, so it was shame and rage. So I could see, well, okay. There's a lot of women, I think, I mean, that my experience is a lot of them suppress that or become non-confrontational.
Right.
So if they got out of the box, I could actually see them going there. I'm not saying I'm experiencing this, but it's kind of funny because when I was young, there was a lot of anger. And
Yeah, me too.
And there was, and I obviously leaked it out on women that I shouldn't, that shouldn't be sharing it. But then in my more recent life, I've had kind of this run of girlfriends that seem like, oh, they're angry, or one was even, it was kind of like she was born angry. I was just like, okay, but I just kind of took it as, well, this is kind of your karma. You're just kind of looking at it from the other side at this point, but obviously I can't really do anything about it. So it kind of rings a little bit with me, that's all.
Well, so, and that resonates with the fact that I don't think women are hiding their rage as much as they used to.
They're not hiding in the rage.
Right.
That's
Well, you're saying when they wake up.
Yeah.
that's what this woman's observation. was.
Right,
The
and
seven
I'm saying
women's
it kind of
observation.
makes sense, because when they're younger, a lot of, there's just kind of this very even keel going on. And so maybe they're getting in touch with something and going, okay, I kind of got the short end of the stick on
Enough of this shit.
Had enough,
Yeah,
no more.
that happens with age.
Life is getting short.
Exactly, I don't have time for this crap.
Let's get to it.
Uh-oh,
Gail has a
they're
contribution.
getting madder over there.
Yeah.
I think some anger it's different things. I think it's a defense sometimes. You're defending yourself. You're angry at being treated badly, as injustice and unfairness.
Which is righteous anger, right? Being treated unfairly that's good
Right.
anger.
Right.
It's a
Yeah,
very good
it's
anger.
going
Yes.
on that.
Well, it can be a tool.
Irritation, you don't like something.
Not the best tool, but.
No, there's other ways of dealing with the situation.
Yeah, so that's just the way you're defending yourself, and those things where you're feeling you're being crossed or treated badly. There's a reason, and Dr. Ed Smith of this transformation ministry that I do says people are not just angry people. There is a reason for everything. So
Right.
the thing is to find out what that belief is that is causing that emotion.
And dig a little deeper, because beliefs are just a story we keep telling ourselves over and over until we believe it's fact, but it's not a fact.
It's like propaganda.
Beliefs can change in 1
Say it
second.
enough,
Exactly.
people believe it.
It can change in 1 second. That's why somebody asked Carl Jung in his autobiography, if he believed in God. And he said, no, I know God directly. That's called gnosis. And that's what Gnosis. The Gnostic Christians, millions of them were slaughtered. Millions of knowers were slaughtered. And that's where we're at now. We're at the end stage of that. We're the same ones who were slaughtered. And I can say the things I say about women because I know for a fact I was a woman in my life before this. I had a lot of meditations of sitting through that woman's life and not knowing what the hell I was seeing. And I thought I was insane at times. I had a lot of lives I was viewing through these meditations when I woke up. And that woman really loved sex, who I was in that last life. So, if you're a woman in the 60s and you loved sex, what did you run into? Lots of bullshit from the men, right? Oh, you're a whore.
In the 60s.
I guess it depends on where you were. If you were in the summer of love in California.
Yeah, right.
1967, right?
I died in 62, 63, so I'm not sure how far she came along.
65, so.
Then I came along as chose to be a man this time around, apparently. Okay, so I did my share. What makes you come alive? Obviously, it feels more alive than before this all started. So do you want to share anything you did in the last week that made you come alive versus feeling dead? Or what makes you come alive in general? You don't have to share, you can fast.
Can't think of anything right now.
Can I just say something in there? Because what you just shared with us is information that I feel like brings you to life a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I felt that too.
For sure.
So that's getting rid of the lies. Because
Yeah.
lies are like little deaths.
Yeah.
So the more lies you get rid of, the more alive you become.
It clears.
So if you didn't hear that on the recording, she said, the more lies you can clear, the more, more alive you can feel. And I think that's great. That's wonderful.
But this practice that she does is such a joy of hers. And it's really wonderful when she shares it
And Jay does it also.
and feels the aliveness of it.
Yeah, you're learning. What do you think of it? What do
We'll
you-
come around to her.
Yeah,
Um,
but I just had to, since you couldn't think of anything.
thank you, Jay. That was like a great, you want to share anything?
Observation.
Makes you
Well,
feel.
right now, I live in a very limited situation, but for me these days, I actually just started doing sort of like cold showers. I just turn a pump on in the river and wash myself down, which I never used to do. You know, I always like lots of warm baths and this and that, but recently I did read the book she was talking about, the breath book.
Yeah.
And then I ran across the Wim Hof
Wim Hof
stuff on
stuff.
the
Oh,
internet.
yeah.
And so I started actually doing the breath thing, but it takes so long. Like, you know, I got up to where I was like, okay, let your breath out and still be able to just hang in there for over 2 minutes.
Right.
But for me to build up to that, I've got so much time in it and I'm doing so many things. So, but I did stick with just like, okay, change your pH, I guess is what it does if you just take the water and get cold. And
Right.
and I have a lot of body injuries, so I also found out that sometimes when I get up in the morning, I have like problems with my hip and my back and stuff like that.
Right.
And when I wash down and do that, I can actually just go get on a mob roller and do some moves, and boom, like my alignment gets much, I get more aligned very much quicker if I do that. And so that's one thing I can do right now because I live without electricity and on and on. But when you were talking about water, what's interesting about the place that I live is that I actually, when I got this property, it came with unlimited riparian rights. So one thing I do have is a lot of water on the property. So I actually, like,
It makes me alive.
the property has 2 pipes through the levee. I was telling them earlier, my land is actually under sea level.
Wow.
So I have unlimited water without electricity because it's just a siphon. So I can just open a tap and let it run. And the funny thing about it is you're taking it out of the river, but actually when it goes into the property, it's really going back into the river.
It's the old recycling.
All you gotta look at here is like, okay, so all it really comes down to is how much evaporation is there, really. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, it's just, it's just an interesting thing, back, the things that used to make me more alive would be sailing and motorcycling and stuff like that, but I'm just not doing that kind of thing at the moment. I mean, I don't know whether I'll get back to motorcycling, but I'll certainly get back to sailing.
Right. I want to add into that. The Founder Center Process wrote a page. It's in from Soul Supplement, Dan. So his name is Royal Lee, and he wrote this in 1957, and he talked about raw water versus processed water. And raw water out of a spring, which he labeled spring water, it's the top of the food chain. You're getting something, he called it a pyrogen, pyrogens. And the pyrogen is these minuscule little bacteria of the earth, of the rain falling on the earth, going through the soil, through the roots. There's going to be microbes in that water. There's going to be a structure to it that's not in processed water. And what have I been seeing on the web the last 3 to 5 years? There's a slow movement of, we're selling you raw water now.
Interesting.
Right?
A rare.
Well, there is happy water and unhappy water. They've been looking at piped water or prison water.
Right.
Right.
And this is all connected to the, what is it, the Carolean photography, where
Yeah.
right upon water has a certain thing.
Right.
Then water that's been subjected to heavy metal music has got a whole different.
Yeah.
Format to
Water
it,
holds
and-
information.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they already know that water is like definitely reflecting and absorbing and what have you, what is going on around it. So like city water that's all in these nasty rusty pipes kind of just waiting to be let out is not really happy water, whereas something coming out of a waterfall is on the other end of the spectrum.
So if you're watching this video, this is like what I call one of the foundations of my practice is what's free, easy, right? And gives you the best results.
Yeah.
Those three things. So good water. So when I do my green juices, which is my fresh plants, because that's sunlight turned into a plant. So like I told you guys, some of these leaves are they're not even a day old. It was in your green smoothie day. Some of those leaves that was in that green smoothie did not exist yesterday.
Wow.
That's life. Okay, if you want to do like your jab, if you got jabbed, what do? Get green juices in your freaking body. Get raw food in your body, because that's life. And that's right, raw meat, raw fish. I don't like raw poultry, but people do it. It's really sketchy, but it just doesn't, it tastes weird. Like, so the only raw chicken I actually enjoyed was it was marinated in lime and onions and celery and tomatoes overnight, like a ceviche. And the chicken tasted cooked because of the acid cooked it over a 12-hour period. Like it didn't look that pink, weird, you know, raw chicken's like, it's just hideous.
Didn't you have some of the chicken livers last week?
I brought chicken livers, but I've got to get them out in time
Yeah,
tonight. I
last week,
marinated them
somebody
in.
brought them last week. I can't remember. It
Yeah,
was
true.
yours did. Oh, you did, okay.
I did it a level higher. I marinated them in beet, ginger, gut shot, sauerkraut juice, and soy sauce and lemon. Because and I cut them in smaller pieces too. Because you get that big freaking liver, it's like I gotta get all that thing down, you know.
Yeah, just do it. Don't taste it,
Blending
just do it.
Blending it might work. Well, I had a macrobiotic teacher years ago, and he would ask how to cut, you know, for how do we cut this, master? You know, I had masters in my life. Oh, master, how do we cut this? So one of my favorite replies was friendly sized pieces.
There you go.
What the hell is a friendly sized piece?
How do you eat it?
Something that doesn't make you gag.
Yeah, where you don't have to gag on it, right? A friendly sized piece.
There you go.
So I thought that was an interesting adjective, like, oh, friendly size. So moving along, Lindsay, anything you want to share, bringing to life?
I'm just getting started. I've been in a dark hole for a bit.
But you're here.
So I would say my current joys are small but mighty. That would be my hummingbird feeder right now. It's one of my favorite things. I would say my dog. I do love her a whole lot. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Beautiful. What kind of dog?
She's a toy fox terrier. She's like 13 this
Five
month.
pounds?
Yeah, 5 pounds and kind of shrinking. We're working on it. And no eyeballs.
No eyeballs. Yeah.
No, like they're so shy.
Wow.
We had them removed maybe like a year and a half ago
Yeah,
for glaucoma.
yeah, interesting.
But she's so much better.
Yeah.
Like she's so much happier.
Like this dog.
Yeah, she's
Yeah, she's asleep, huh?
Mhm.
Yeah, she just tolerates everything.
I don't know.
Exactly.
You feel complete, Lindsay?
right now.
Yeah, for this part of the share.
Yeah.
Okay. Drew, anything you did in the last week? Because you mentioned last week, is there anything you did in the last week that made you come alive?
Sailing.
You sailed?
Oh, where'd you go?
Awesome.
Last 2 Sundays.
Nice.
Awesome. Did you go out into the bay, or where'd you go?
Yeah, go around the mile buoy, you know, sail around different places.
Nice.
Anybody else here go with you? Who went with you?
No.
No,
Drew, how did the fishing teaching go?
Oh, yeah, the fishing teaching, yeah.
You tell them how to not catch fish. They all became vegetarians, right?
Watch the seal.
Yeah. Thank you, Drew.
And froze our tails.
Okay. So Tori, you have anything in the last week that you chose to do?
Yeah, people will pause when I share that my name is Satori. For those who kind of have a sense of what that's all about, you know? So I said, yeah, it's just a moment. And I shared that I did have it for 6 hours, you know, and so I explained that. And then I said, would you like to have one? So they stop and then IDs with them. And it's been wonderful. They just sort of melt. It's just, it really works. I said, wow, you know, because conversations, you never stop chattering, you know, in the brain. I said, like, this is like in the sauna at the spa, you know. So I'm loving that.
So see, your voice is a little softer, so I'll
Yeah.
say, Satori said, bringing people back to a quiet place. And would you like some Satori?
Would you like a Satori?
Would you like a Satori experience? Oh, it's beautiful. And so I ran across the word in a book called, instead of tennis, it was called Zennis. And he was saying that if you want to get into Satori, you've got to work on being present in the moment. You know, this is a Japanese word.
Yeah. Yeah, Japanese.
Thank you.
Tamari is sushi.
What?
Tamari is sushi.
All right, Gal.
What do you got, Jonty, in the last week? Come alive versus
Well,
feel
well,
dead.
you know, my thing was I like movement and nature. So I did, you know, I got in nature and I moved. And that was great. I even tried going to sleep in nature a couple of times and that worked good too. But,
Really?
yeah, but what I want to just bring the conversation back to the pulse taking.
Okay.
And the idea that our thoughts are not our own, they just come from somebody or somewhere else. And I had this this friend who was a chiropractor, and she used to practice in Santa Cruz. Now she practices somewhere near Grass Valley. She was called Mary Jo Cravata. And she was telling me she was taking pulse on this person. And this whole like early life of the person came to her. She said, oh, you know, the person was, I can't remember the exact thing, but something like pushed out of the pram when she was 3 by her own kid.
Wow.
And that was part of her disease, you know.
Mhm.
And so when I used to take pulses, you know, so from that, you know, I was trying to figure out the 28 pulses. But I, you know, I never did, but I always used to ask, oh, so what are you going to teach me? And so I would try and be open to what, you know, was being, you know, was there to be taught. And I'm sure craniosacral people do this all the time. They tune into the body and they just sort of get information. And so, you know, the kind of information that would come to me like, oh, Duho Jishen Tang or Shengun Baidu San, you know, so that the herbal formula would come to me.
Right.
So that was kind of so you could just do, you know, what is it? Nature's, what's your line? Standard process. What, you know, what, you know, anyway.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I found. I got so frustrated trying to follow the TCM model, the Chinese medical model, that I did the same thing, Jonty. I just said, because the pulse you're taking is on the lung meridian to begin with.
Right.
So you're on a channel of information to begin with. And so I did this. That's exact. You know, we did the same thing, Jonty. I went, what do you have to tell me? And so when I take notes, my teachers would have been, you know, horrified because I don't have the classic pulse notes, you know. It's like 3 pluses and what's harmonized or balanced, you know. And I'm not talking in TCM terms because all that matters to me in my scope notes when I look back is, do I understand it?
Yeah.
You know, I don't need my soap notes to necessarily be understandable too. It would be nice, you know, if like Jonty could read my soap and go, oh yeah. And that's why the Chinese medical language has its terms, and the same thing happens to me with plants. So I'm working with a client, especially the first time, if I open up big enough and it's like, oh, rosemary popped in, yarrow, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then I know that the entity that is the plant is asking, hey, I can help this person.
That's fine, right? That's let alone 28 of them.
Yeah.
Oh, 28 pulses.
Those are the actual ones.
Those are just the
like, is it
basic
here?
ones.
Those are the basic ones. Yeah, there's more, you know. Oh man, you just get lost.
Goes up forever.
Well, I was 10 years into study of all this macrobiotics and Chinese medicine. It's kind of, macrobiotics is more based in Japan and TCM is more in China, but nevertheless, they show the 5-element thing. And I was studying, and one of my teachers was like, when is it going to be not mechanical anymore?
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, for me, it's about 15 years. And I was like, that's 5 more years. And then, yeah, sure enough, it was a point where my family goes, your recall went from looking at books to instant. And I'm like,
Interesting.
we don't get to plan that though, do we? It's like, it just sort of happens.
Happens.
It's just application. Deanne, on to
Well.
last week. What did you do to feel alive?
So this quote came up, which has really been talking to me this week. It says, and then there is the most dangerous risk of all, the risk of spending your life not doing what you want on the bet you can buy yourself the freedom to do it later. It's like, oof, right? And I know that I am at a point in my life where I know some big changes are coming, and I've just been kind of sitting on the fence of when and just thinking, no, I've got time. It's like I know it's coming, so that's a whole different story. But that really spoke to me this week of, and I've been talking to a lot of people about this. Like, what do you? We do this, and when we're young, of course, we think our whole future is in front of us, and we can do so much. We have so much hope. And our banking, of course, our whole future is in front of us. But as we are getting older, and I have fewer days in front of me, I mean, who knows how many, right? I could have 20 days or 20 years, who knows? But, is this how I want to be spending my energy this time? The non-renewable resource, So I'm really very mindful of it, and really trying to be more in the field of energy and present in that. And it's just been really interesting because, everybody talks about how they love being in nature, and of course it inspires us. It's beautiful to be in the redwoods and such. But even in my own yard, I was watering the other day. I have hummingbird feeders all around. I've got many of them, and I was watering a comfrey plant that you gave me, and watering lots of things around. And I was standing there with the hose on a sprinkler, and a hummingbird came right up, like right here, and she was just looking at me, and I'm just very still, I'm not moving, and she just like right there. And I say she because it wasn't that brilliant red, much plainer, fewer colors. So I assumed female and pretty small. Anyway, and she's hovering, just looking at me, and then she turns to the water and she turns to me. It's like, you want a shower? So I just turned the water up, and she just flitted in and out, and just had her bath, flitted out, flitted in, flitted out, flitted in for probably 2 minutes. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful, right?
Yeah.
It's like just being present in that. I mean, makes my week for sure.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
We get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's happened to me. Does that happen to anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's
all
like,
the time.
talk about coming to life,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was sitting on
Wow.
a little back porch and watching this whole little group of these guys.
Yeah.
And I just watched, and then I went in, and sure enough, they didn't follow. Coming in right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't know that you're totally related.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then when I was moving once from the top of the Zyanti, and I always talked to these two horses.
Yeah.
They were people had just gotten them, and then they're in the trees, and I'm going, yeah, no sun, right? So I'm packing all the stuff. Sure enough, those two horses didn't get out to come up and say goodbye.
Oh,
Oh.
Yeah.
I had to get 2 apples tomorrow.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about horses.
Oh.
But there you go. I mean, there's communication going
yeah.
on all the time.
And again, my hummingbirds tell me when it's time to change the feeder, the nectar.
Oh, they did.
And
Okay, very well.
and also, and I have one crow that just tells me every morning when he's ready for some more seed.
There you go. Yeah, your communication.
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, right now. My office faces out the front window, and the crow comes up and kind of flutters in the window and lands in the grass and just looks at me. Okay, all right.
Who's trained?
Yeah.
Do you really need me to answer that question?
No, it's obvious.
It's obvious.
I had a blue jay that would come every time I'd have tea,
Yeah.
and I'd have cookies, and I'd sit there and I was having, I was about to eat this cookie, and I was going like this, and then this blue flash goes by. There's no cooking my hand. Now look over here, here's like the blue jay that's like eating my cookie.
They have no fear, Blue Jay.
No, they don't.
Wow.
Yep.
Oh, man, that was good.
No, I'm just.
You knew we had a narrow window.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Deanne, that was. Jay, you had
That was really great.
you had something last week for us?
Well, just from what she was just saying, the whole feeling, you remember when last week I said connecting and networking for people. And it's really paying attention and observing and hearing what's really being said, or just making really in tune observations, being present in the moment and trying to pick up and connect to others. The hummingbirds, when they're in the garden, you know, and you're watering and they come and they connect with you in that present moment. I mean, it's the same thing of when I'm doing the networking thing for people and I'm connecting them with others. It's all from hearing and listening and observing one thing and another thing and bringing them together. And so those present moments and that whole energy that I feel when I'm on the water, and I have a lot of dreams about water and being a mermaid and ascending and going in and out of the water and stuff, but still connecting with those energies of being in the water and out of the water and the wind, you know, being in a live body to be able to have those perceptions where I am connecting other energies is just magical. To me, it's the most joyful thing that you can do. I was just in this group of people that I haven't seen for a long time that I used to be very close. They're kind of extended family before my COVID family. And they were all at my 55th birthday, which was held at the Del Mar Theater. And that was my not 55th, but halfway to 110 birthday party. And we all went to see a movie about the penguins. It was that penguin, March of the Penguins.
Oh, yeah.
And came and we had the party on the mezzanine, and it was just after they had remodeled. The timing was like I was pins and needles if they were going to open in time for the party and stuff. And they all said, wow, we all remember your 110. And I said, yeah, I mean, this whole idea that I was going to live to be 110, you know, and I said, yeah, it all kind of changed when I got hit by a car, you know, and I had to regroup about, and then I had a stroke, and then I'm like, okay, so what is it? Am I really going to make it to 100? It made me question that. So it made me more alive in each and every moment.
Right.
And this whole intensity about connecting energies of other people and really listening and really connecting and feeling their presence physically and feeling my own presence in my own body, whether it's sexual or orgasmic or excited and positive, you know, whatever it is. And just going to Dr. Eisendorf's shared medical appointment about you know, how studies of optimism actually lengthens your life. There's been scientific studies.
That was his topic?
That, well, the book that he was reviewing was
Really?
You Are the Placebo.
Oh, that's Joe Dispenza's book. Yeah.
Exactly.
You just gotta love Eisendorf, you know, I just love him, and then, you know, like,
Oh, yes,
wow,
and,
you know?
and being open and receptive to whatever he's presenting. He's so tuned in. It's exactly what I need to hear. And to be so open and receptive to him in those moments when he is authentically presenting what he feels is important. And sometimes he shifts the things around, and it's so incredibly well-timed. So those kind of moments are so synchronistic and so magical. It just brings me such joy.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you, Jay. For those of you that, Steve. I want to mention, I personally met with and had lunch with Eisendorf many times. And I was walking with Carol Bjorn in that area where Eisendorf used to live back there behind Chaminade. And she was saying how admiring she was of his farm. And, you know, this is a physician that had his chickens and he had his own garden and he did sauerkraut. And the quote that I want anybody watching this to take note of is that as a medical doctor, he told me, and I'm telling this from my experience, not from his, but he told me if he gives a client, because he gave me a dozen eggs, and I walked out, that's really generous, that he gave me a dozen eggs. He goes, I can't give them to my clients. So I give my clients my eggs, my vegetables, or my sauerkraut that I make myself, I will lose my license. End quote.
Yeah.
End quote.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't tell you that medicine isn't into health. What would?
Yeah.
And yet, he would teach some of these classes on his green juices. Green drinks, and he would make them in there and we would get to sample them, but we got to see him. put-
He got to get away with that. He got away with it.
Oh, yeah.
You mean,
Lots.
you shouldn't,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
He got
no,
away with
because
Oh, that
he
was
did it
excellent.
in the moment, actually given a teaching demonstration.
Yeah.
His green drinks, and he could show us, and we all got to sample them. It was great. And he would bring things from his garden to put into it. And would talk about it. And when he told us after the COVID stuff was over, that he sold his farm
Right.
and he
Right.
was homeless for a while. He was living in a hotel. I
Really?
mean, major transition, and now bought a house on the west side. So a totally different thing. So he is some reason encompassing a whole new life
Yeah.
for himself because the
Yeah.
farm was too much.
It was too
Yeah.
much. And the other thing that struck me about Eisendorf was he may not show this to a lot of people, but I got to see a vulnerable side of this man. And to me, he had puppy dog eyes.
Oh,
He would flash these puppy dog eyes every now and then. I'd be like, wow, he didn't lose his kid. What that showed me is when I was a kid, I remember looking at the adults going, these adults suck, man. They're not having any fun. I'm never losing my kid.
Yeah.
And I think he didn't lose his by the look I see in his eyes. When you're close to nature, it's easy to keep your child, right?
yeah.
Because there's so many things in nature that you just can't figure out.
He's tuned into the present, and every time I've gone to see him for any reason, he's right there with you.
Mm.
And in the shared medical appointments, I explained to him, I haven't been in because of COVID and I don't want to get the shot, Then I told him the reason why, and I said, I had a stroke, I don't think it's appropriate for me. And I know he probably had to be vaccinated or somehow is still working there. So
Right.
I said, I really don't think this is right for me. And he said outright to me, you should trust your intuition.
Yeah, good.
I mean, how many physicians would
Right.
say that?
Right.
That's
Exactly.
pretty rare.
Right.
To me, he is amazing.
He's a true doctor to me.
Yeah. Yes.
Like he's a real doctor.
He, in his heart of hearts, really wants to help heal.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we better move.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting. Thank you, Jay. Wow. Ken, do you have anything to offer us for the last week? You did Be Alive. Looks like he shaved. Doesn't he look like he
Yeah, I
shaved?
think he did.
He's a different guy.
I couldn't tell what it was.
Mhm.
How do you feel, Shaven?
I'm thinking of buying a razor.
How did you shave it?
I did it with my hair clipper,
Oh,
Did
really?
you? Nice.
but it's not short enough.
Yeah.
I just hadn't seen my face for a long time. So I wanted to see my face.
Nice.
Cool.
You look 20 years younger.
Yeah, I like my face.
I think we like your face too.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Did that make you feel alive? Was shaving all that off? Do you feel more alive? Seeing your face?
Yeah.
And that's really simple.
It all came from last week, huh?
I know.
What's that?
And it all came from our group last week.
Good luck.
Well, I wish I could shave and feel alive. It's like,
And shave it off.
through the post.
Electric razor. Okay, so it's 9:20 something. I guess I will say goodbye to the recording and we'll finish this outside of that. Bye, everybody.